Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are going to be discussing aestheticism, or sometimes also referred to as aesthetic theory. Really excited about these songs that we have lined up today. I'm going to hand it over to Jenn to walk us through what aestheticism is.
I'm really excited about this, but this is definitely one of the more nebulous concepts we've had. So I have a feeling we will all have slightly different takes on it, which is fun. That's a good thing. So aestheticism at its core is about the experience of beauty. It's enjoying beauty for the sake of enjoying it. And aestheticism highly values that the purpose of life, the purpose of living is to enjoy beauty, it's very specifically tends to be about art. I don't think it always is interpreted that way, but at the core it is. The best example, I was explaining this to some friends actually who were asking what we were about to record, and this example seemed to help the most. So it's the one I'm going to give here. But if Maansi and I were at a museum together, and Maansi was an art student, and she was trying to understand how the particular artist did light in that piece of art, and I was there just to enjoy it. So I'm just sitting there taking in the art, thinking it's beautiful, and Maansi's right next to me studying it and understanding the lighting. I would be having an aesthetic experience. You would not be, Maansi, because you're trying to get something out of it. So the idea of aestheticism is, we say we overuse the word vibes, but truly no thoughts, just vibes is kind of aestheticism. Like you're just there to experience it and to enjoy it and to appreciate it. And it's not, there's no bigger purpose.
So it's really
beauty
like
is the purpose.
Taking the intellectualism out of the experience, and it's experiencing beauty for this just without thinking, really.
If you can think about, like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go, but I'm sure we've all had experiences. We've talked about musicals and going to shows a lot, that there are those moments where it's almost transcendent, where you feel like you're kind of emotionally taken away from reality and you're just caught up in like, this is gorgeous, the setting is beautiful, the music is taking me away, everything I see is just wonderful. That's kind of it. And it does take the intellectualism out, but I think there's kind of an argument, and I know we'll talk about Oscar Wilde more, but Oscar Wilde talks about this a lot. Yeah. He was a member of the group called the Aesthetes. It was like they were self-identified believers of this. And if you kind of start digging into it more, I think there's you start to get this feeling like that the intellectualism is that beauty should just be enjoyed for beauty. Which is like, we start getting complicated when we go that deep.
Yeah, I did in my research come across some like principles of aestheticism, which I think it's like you want to appreciate the beauty just for the beauty. But if we're talking about how do you create that beauty or how do you talk about that beauty, you could break it down into a few different things. And like within the world of art and even I think specifically art, there were things like line, color, texture, perspective, space, form, volume, which is academic, talking about how beautiful something is, like using these things to describe it. So like, what is the color of this? Why is it so beautiful? Like, what's the texture? I think it felt like there was like ways of appreciation that you could do to give it some sort of language maybe. And maybe aesthetic works use more descriptive language to really like focus on the beauty and imagery more so than other kinds of works.
I've got in front of me my high school copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, because this is what I started to read to prepare. And then there's a quote early on that might help us. It says, he's talking to Dorian, or about Dorian Gray, about the portrait. Beauty is a form of genius, is higher indeed than genius, as it needs no explanation. It is of the great facts of the world, like sunlight or springtime or the reflection in dark waters of that silver shell we call the moon. It cannot be questioned. It has its divine right of sovereignty. It makes princes of those who have it. You smile, when you have lost it, you won't smile. People say sometimes that beauty is only superficial. That may be so, but at least it is not so superficial as thought is. To me, beauty is the wonder of wonders. It is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. The true mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible.
Yeah, and Wilde, I do love that. I really love Oscar Wilde.
Me too.
But if you track like literature, art, any of it, you can see that almost every generation tends to be reacting against the one before them.
Right.
So aestheticism is interesting because the two trends you tend to see is like high morality and then like high romanticism, beauty, you know, and those tend to go back and forth. So aestheticism, like you can see it in ancient Greek texts, and it's kind of constantly there. And I was thinking too, even I think I brought up Moulin Rouge in another conversation of ours at one point, but I'm bringing it up again. The idea of that like bohemian lifestyle is also, you know, Oscar Wilde. I think that intellectualization is an interesting idea because it's not saying, what am I trying to say with this? It's an interesting idea because bohemian stuff was often kind of considered like low art. It's weird. If you see Rent when they do like their like performances, you're like, what? Yeah. Like what's happening here? But for them, it's beauty for the sake of beauty. So aestheticism, I think we'll talk a lot about Oscar Wilde because one, he's interesting. He's really famous for it, but you can see versions of it throughout time. And I have not met Oscar Wilde, but I don't know if he would agree with like La Vie Boheme. I don't know if he would be like, yes, this is aestheticism. But I think the bohemians of the time living that La Vie Boheme would have considered it that. So that's why it's kind of fun. I think it's kind of open for interpretation.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some professors out there who would hate that I said that, and I don't care. I said it anyways.
Call in as if we're like a radio show. DM us, email us, contact us. We'd love to have a conversation.
Call me, beat me if you want to reach me.
Oh, wow. Man, throwback.
Flashback.
The only
impossible.
Other book that is a flashback. The only other book I'll bring up, because I think it can help too, is The Giver, which I think like most U.S. students read in middle school. And if you haven't, go back and read it. It's a pretty good young adult book. It's going to be a fast read for you.
Wasn't Taylor Swift in the movie adaptation?
I was just going to say.
It does tie into Taylor here.
All together.
So we did it. But in The Giver, it's a life with no pain. Like they've done that. But as the book goes on, you start to realize like they also don't see in color. They don't have music. They don't have art. And even as a middle schooler, I remember all of my like classmates and I being like, oh, then that's not life. Life isn't worth living if I can't see color, if I can't have music. And I think that's the core for all aestheticism is whatever your version of this is, art, beauty, is what makes humans and life worth living. And I think that's the core of it.
Well, speaking of beauty, unless Maansi, you want to...
I just wanted to add that I think it's really interesting that until aestheticism came around, that wasn't always the primary purpose of art. It's not really related to the conversation we're having today, but I do think that because we look at lyrics through different lenses, it's interesting to think that previously there was this idea of painting to reflect the realistic images, or like you're only painting to really reflect the reality you're seeing, or sometimes you're painting to convey emotion. The idea that you could do other things with art or literature, and that was actually the primary purpose until now. So today when we talk, I guess like we'll be focusing a lot more on the very aesthetic qualities of the lyrics, but obviously there are other ways of looking at it, which is kind of what this podcast is all about.
For sure. So speaking of beauty, I have the first song of the day, and I went pretty literal. I picked Gorgeous. So
very literal, and I love it.
Very literal. And I'm going to admit, this is like aestheticism. I'm going to learn here along with all of our readers, listeners. So we'll see how I did. But Gorgeous is from Reputation. Came out in 2020. Hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, we'll know when Reputation Taylor's version comes out. This is track 8, and it was written by Max Martin, Shellback, and Taylor Swift. When Jenn shared what aestheticism is, beauty for the sake of beauty, obviously my mind immediately went to Gorgeous. As I listened to this song, I think I have more questions than actual answers or I've got more conversation starters and questions around aestheticism and this song than I do like, oh, this is a song about aestheticism, because as I was listening and kind of I print out the lyrics and I mark them up. I have a color for positive words and emotions and a color for negative words and emotions, and then a color for beauty. And there's a lot of negativity in this song. Made fun of me, makes me hate. Like if I just said these words, what would you think this song is? Made fun of the way you talk. It makes me hate you so much. You ruined my life. I'm so furious. I'm jealous of her. It actually hurts. I feel like I might sink and drown and die. like this is not positive. And when I think of aestheticism, at least in my understanding, I think of enjoyment of beauty. But I mentioned in our introduction, in my research or in my preparation for this episode, I started rereading The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I kind of saw some similarities in the way they approach Dorian Gray and the portrait. Now, to be fair, I'm only like halfway through my reread. I know what happens because I read this in high school, and you read the introduction that tell you what's going to happen. But there's a similar feeling towards Dorian Gray and his portrait, where there's this sense of awe and inspiration at how beautiful it is, but also hatred of him for being so beautiful and young. And so that's what I saw in the similarity. So is the song a perfect example of aestheticism? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I think it is a really nice parallel to The Picture of Dorian Gray. And as Jenn shared with us, like Oscar Wilde is an aesthete. I'll pause there. I would love your thoughts, because I know sometimes you're all like, why did you pick that song?
I love that you picked this song. My first thought was that the song also really represents Basil and how he feels about Dorian.
Yeah.
Because he's very much in love with him.
Yes.
But is also very stressed out by his ongoing corruption too. And this song does kind of capture that. Like, I love you. I kind of wish I didn't. This is not a great situation. But and it's interesting too. And I think this is why it works so well, because the song is about you're so gorgeous. This isn't a strong personality. This isn't someone who, like, this is just based on your face.
Looks,
I am like
beauty.
Overwhelmed right now. And that's Basil to Dorian, the whole book.
And I think there is the sense of, if when you like really just appreciate something for what it is, I think there is a sense of, my life has been altered. I'm not able to move on beyond this. And I think I really like the drama that comes with, I might die if I don't get this.
And drown and die.
Yeah. And to me, that's the epitome of like, you're just so entranced by the beauty. It's the idea that beauty is lifeblood. Like, it is everything. And it's so perfect. And it's disrupting my day to day.
The hyperbole of it, right? Like, that's what we're getting to. You're so cool. It makes me hate you so much. You've ruined my life by not being mine. Like, the extremes, this extreme beauty, which should be very positive and positively life altering, causes this extreme negative reaction, but not actually ruined your life. It's just, now that you know what beauty and gorgeous is, you can't think
go back.
or see. Yeah, you can't go back. You can't do anything the same way.
It's all consuming
anymore. It is overwhelming. And I think it's a really interesting, when this song came out, I think the first thing we were all obsessed with was which baby is saying the word gorgeous in the beginning, and it's Blake Lively and Reynolds' kid. And then after that, it's like everyone is obsessed with who is she singing about, but not what does the song mean. And I'm excited to like look at what is she actually saying. Because what she's actually saying is, I am so overwhelmed by beauty and the beauty I see here that I want to die. What?
It reminds me of the very famous quote in Despicable Me, where the little girl is like, "It's so fluffy, I'm gonna die." Like...
I love that we just brought in Despicable Me. That makes me really happy. But that's how I feel when I see my dog. She's so fluffy and cute. Oh my God, I'm just gonna cry. It's the best.
Cuteness aggression.
And this is gorgeous aggression. This song is that's actually a perfect way to describe this song. The song is beauty aggression. I actually wrote down the dark side of aesthetics and beauty. That's what I saw out of this song. Yeah, so there was a line in Dorian Gray that I compared. So he said, if you have a girlfriend, I'm jealous of her, but if you're single, I'm honestly worse because you're so gorgeous, it actually hurts. And then there's a line in the book, though I am a little jealous of the picture for being a whole month younger than I am, I must admit I delight in it, right? So that's Dorian talking about his own portrait. And I kind of got that same vibes, although that's him talking literally about himself. Wow.
Yeah. The idea of all consuming is so interesting, because it's like, I feel like this happens sometimes with art, where you like see or art is supposed to change you in some way, or beauty is supposed to change you in some way. And the idea that like you see something that's so beautiful that you are forever changed and you can't stop thinking about it and your mind is stuck on it. And that's kind of, to me, what this song is getting at, is that I am so fixated because I can't move on until I like have this thing.
The whole aestheticism movement, I think, to me, I like the whole idea that you treat something better or different because it is beautiful is a really fascinating social commentary. And I think we do the same thing today with weight. I was just watching a TikTok where someone was talking about being on Ozempic, and they were like, you know what? People treat me better. and I am treated differently when I'm thin. And it is one of these really negative, harsh realities of society and how we look at beauty, right? Because weight and thin and it's appearance. It is an aspect of beauty. And I think that's just the dark side of aestheticism. And I'm like, as I'm reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, I think that's kind of what we're getting at, is the dark side of maintaining that beauty and focusing on beauty for the sake of beauty. When you don't go any deeper than that and you don't get into morality, you end up with an immoral society and life. And I think similarly, if I bring it back to Taylor Swift, I see this song with a lot of doom. And I mean, again, you're so gorgeous, I can't say anything to your face. So here's somebody you think is beautiful that you won't talk to. You know, I'm jealous. You know, I feel like I might sink and drown and die. You make me happy, it turns back to sad. There's nothing I hate more than what I can't have. You're so gorgeous, it makes me so mad. Like, how is beauty then positive if you are associating it with all these negative emotions?
I think something that we get, particularly in Dorian Gray, but also maybe a little bit in the song too, is hedonism and
Yes.
aestheticism are different things, but they get mixed up, and they're neighbors. They're close neighbors. But hedonism is very specifically the pursuit of pleasure and beauty without regard for moral consequence. And aestheticism is simply enjoying art for the sake of art without deeper influence. So I think something that's interesting, and I feel like you kind of see this in Dorian Gray, the idea of making a person the object of your aesthetic experience becomes problematic because that there's moral consequence in that. But when
that's
it's with like,
song.
And that's the song. But when it's like a painting, it's like, great, I can enjoy this, and I can pursue enjoying more art without really hurting anybody. But when I start rejecting moral consequence, I have moved away from aestheticism and moved into the world of hedonism, and that's where it becomes a problem.
So I should bring this song back when we do hedonism, is what you're saying.
That would be such a fun topic. We should do that.
Putting it on the list for season 2.
But I think it is interesting, this idea of I'm so furious at you for making me feel this way, but what can I say? You're gorgeous. And again, it is interesting because it's a person, and this song to me kind of captures that first moment of like being attracted to someone. And I think we hear commentary about this, and like, you know, I remember like when Jennifer Lopez like was getting married to a new person every couple of years, and people had a lot of criticisms, and like if a man was doing it, they wouldn't have those criticisms. But
facts.
The idea of falling in love is really fun. Staying in love is a lot of work. And I think that is kind of what this song is getting at, of like, oh, this is fun. I'm so mad at you because now I have to like,
no, I have to
know
like
that
you.
I can't have you, or I have to like you, da da da. But like, it's just like, it's that fun kind of, it's kind of a poppy, bouncy song. But
that's serious. She does this again. She did it again. Oops, she did it again. Thanks, Brittany.
But it's not like some of her other songs where it's kind of about being in a relationship or another person. It's very shallow.
And it is lighthearted. Like even though the lyrics are really negative to what you're saying, Jodi, like I think unless we do that exercise and really highlight the positive and negative, like you don't come out of this song thinking it's overwhelmingly negative. Like it feels like she says these negative words in a very lighthearted way. Yeah. I think she has a giggle in here too.
It's satire.
Right. But she has a giggle in here at some point as well. And she's just like,
when she wants to go home to her cats. Ugh.
It's like a crush. It's like the ultimate like first time.
You mean it's like Enchanted?
I knew it was coming.
Oh my gosh.
Setup. The setup.
Because I raised my hand. You know, when I raise my hand, I'm making an Enchanted or a musical reference.
I was like, oh my God, am I about to do a layup for you?
You did it. Teamwork.
Solid assist.
Jen, you brought up the line, I'm so furious at making me feel this way. It has nothing to do with aestheticism, but I was like, girl, you are responsible for your own emotions. This person is not. But you also brought up the double standard of women and men and the difference in, you know, who is having this conversation. I don't think we're used to hearing a woman say these things to a man. You're gorgeous. Like that is not typically something that we hear women say to men. We don't often sit and praise a man's beauty. We often have men praising a woman's beauty, which I thought was interesting. So if you read this from a man's perspective, it's I mean, I still am like, I mean, it makes me want to vomit, but
It's true. It's kind of like one of those things, like I feel like we've brought this up in the past also when we talk. It's like the kind of things that women or girls would say to their girlfriends,
Yes.
but like would never like write a song about it or put
Tell
into
him.
work or literature. And actually that brings me to a question for Jenn, maybe, is that during the aestheticism movement, were there are a lot of prominent female artists or writers involved in there also? Because I do think historically men have had the privilege of really sitting there and admiring the beautiful form of the female body or of women. And here you have a woman that is shamelessly gushing over this male form. And it's kind of like a power play in some ways. It's kind of like I can sit here and be like, what's going to happen? What do I want to do? What's the move I want to make? This dude is so beautiful. Like, how do I advance on this? What do I do with this? And it's kind of like a power play.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know Wilde had like a large social group, shockingly. And I think women were a part of it. I know a huge part of it was Wilde was a homosexual man. And so that was a big part of it too. It was kind of like I wanted to say a safe space for that. But he
not safe.
It didn't work out for him.
He did not really discriminate between admiring men and women.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is maybe where some of the like gender stuff kind of gets interesting, is if you really take aesthetic theory and you want to apply it to people. In some ways that's super problematic, but in some ways it kind of starts to reject gender, because you're not, the whole point of aesthetic theory is you're doing it without basically ulterior motives. And this song is interesting in that because it's, you know, I've got a boyfriend, you're so cool, it makes me hate you so much, you know, like it's, I wish you were mine, basically. But she's just admiring this person.
Right.
And where that's interesting with kind of gender is if you take aesthetic theory, I can admire the beauty of any person regardless of gender and not have ulterior motives. Like, just because I say you are a beautiful person doesn't mean I'm trying to get with you, trying to do anything. I can just say
beauty for the sake of beauty.
People are beautiful, which is true. One of the other examples I was going to maybe bring up at some point is it's really interesting if you think about like the female body is really fascinating in art, because it's one of probably the most painted thing in the world might be the female body, or just represented in art. In that same female body, you also get in things like porn, and it's not just being admired of like, that's beautiful, you know, like there's ulterior motive in those things. And whatever your opinions are about that, it's just different. Aesthetic theory means I can look at a painting that includes nude women and just be like, women are beautiful. What a beautiful form. What a wonderful thing to look at. And so I think that is interesting. And you get that with this song. And I think that's where it is different, in that like if a man was singing the song, if a man wrote this song, it wouldn't just be, oh my gosh, you're so gorgeous. A lot
ulterior
of other things going on. And this song is just like, look at your face. Literally. I can't say anything to your face. Look at your face. Which is interesting. It's very female gaze-y.
And now that I'm actually reading between the lines, there is actually, I know this isn't, we're not deep diving right now, but like this is actually, but we will. There is actually no gender associated with the gorgeous person. So she says that I've got a boyfriend, but that doesn't actually
doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Right. Doesn't tell you what the speaker's gender is, or, you know, maybe the person who's gorgeous is also male, but that doesn't guarantee it.
I also just briefly got a reading of this in my mind where it's just like drunk in the girls' bathroom where everyone's drunk at the club, and this is just what they're all saying to each other. Because
oh my god, I love it. Best. That's what you do in the girls' bathroom when you're all drunk.
Yeah,
oh my god, you're gorgeous. I love your hair. Your dress is amazing. No, you look beautiful. You look beautiful.
I can't say anything to your face. Seriously, look at your face.
Stop it. It actually hurts. How gorgeous you are.
You're so gorgeous. It actually hurts.
Actually hurts. Oh god. Okay. Social.
That's not aesthetic theory, but that's my favorite reading. So
I would like a music video for that version.
I love it. Well,
so I am next. And I did go a slightly different direction than Jodi, which is very fun. I chose Willow. So Willow was written by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner, came out in 2020 on Evermore, and is track 1. Willow, to me, I am a Reputation girly through and through, but Willow, the first time I heard Willow, I just felt like I like teleported. I don't know, like my soul just lifted out of my body. This song just really struck me.
Okay, so you went from the perspective of like aestheticism in terms of how you felt.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a song that I felt like I
love
had
it.
an aesthetic experience when I listened
Okay.
to it. And I mean, double down when I saw the Eras tour, man, that performance was just like,
I think with this song too, like the music video also, like I think you can
Beautiful.
throw all of it in there, but she
Yeah.
really went all in.
yeah. And so I actually pulled a quote from Oscar Wilde. So he said, quote, "Aestheticism is the search after the signs of the beautiful. It is the science of the beautiful through which men seek the correlation of the arts. It is, to speak more exactly, the search after the secret of life." And one, I thought that was a really beautiful quote, and kind of went into like that stuff I said about the giver of like the secret of life is like the beauty, it's the stuff around us. And this song really just kind of did that for me. I just feel very taken up with the song. I feel very like relaxed when I hear this song. I truly I just think it's really beautiful. I love all the remixes. And it was really funny preparing for this. Oh, go ahead, Jodi.
No, go ahead, because my question as I was preparing for this was, what is this song about?
That's something I really enjoyed too. So it was really funny to me preparing for this episode because I had to break my aesthetic experience and try to think about the song a little bit.
Right.
And I was like, I'm like, seriously, no thoughts, just vibes. Every time the song comes on, I'm just like swaying and just like,
and that
this is a
happens
vibe.
often.
You said the word swaying. I think it's about movement.
Ooh.
Yeah, I like that. It's also I thought the song was interesting as I was thinking about it too, because it's one of the songs I haven't heard like a ton of like, well, who is this about or what is she doing here? Everyone's just like, it's Willow.
It's
like
Willow.
It's fun.
Which is great.
Which is really fun to me.
I always think of like grandmother Willow from Pocahontas and like how the trees are beautiful, but the trees are known for swaying and it's like bent right to your will. I think it's really like fluid,
I had a
kind of
weeping willow in the backyard when we were kids. My mom let us both pick out trees to plant, and I picked a weeping willow.
Love weeping willows.
My association with this song came out in December 2020. We got my dog Maisel in November 2020, and I did it was an Instagram reel, but I'll put it on our TikTok, so you'll have to follow us. Because when you think about when I sing this song, I'm not going to sing it. I'm going to speak it. I think of my dog. The more that you say, the less I know. Wherever you stray, I follow. I'm begging for you to take my hand, my paw. So I think of my puppy dog.
I love that.
Which is an aesthetic experience.
I do really think of like absolutely beautiful, like free-spirited, like untethered. Although it's interesting because the lyric that you just said actually is tethered. It's like two people are tied together, but like the general vibes that you get or like the feeling that this song brings is this idea of just beautiful, free, and just like, I don't know, free-spirited.
It's about finding a person and loving them, and just like you follow that, you're like, oh, I think.
I think that's definitely a really valid interpretation. That was one of my thoughts too. But that line you said is one of the first ones that I was like, oh, this does continue to work. The more you say, the less I know that the song, it feels like it's really moving away from that intellectualism. And it's very, very experiential. Of someone's taken her away. I could feel you sneaking in as if you were a mythical thing. My train could take you home. Anywhere else is hollow. Like, it's just very like, don't think about it, just experience what's happening. And that's
things you can't explain. I come back stronger than a 90s trend. Why are low-rise jeans and Jenko's back? I don't know. You can't explain it. They shouldn't be back, but they are. And you just kind of go with it. But I will still wear skinny jeans. Thank you very
They're
much.
almost out.
I will be wearing skinny
coming
jeans.
back.
I think this is one of those songs, spoilers, we are not deep diving this one, but it'll be super fun when we deep dive because the interpretations can go across the board. But it does have the line, "That's my man," which is true. But the rest of it, it kind of coming at this from an aesthetic point of view and just from the way I've experienced this song, I feel like this song is very much like a journey towards beauty, towards away from intellectualism, from having plans, from everything being rigid, and just towards this like lifestyle of flexibility and beauty and enjoying the moment and taking it in and not being so tied to all of these other expectations. Yeah, rigid. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
I think it's also really emblematic of the way we now know these songs on Folklore and Evermore were written, which is different from how Taylor traditionally wrote songs. So for these songs, Aaron Dessner sent her the composition, like the music, because he had just like all these things like done. and sent it to her, and she wrote lyrics to music that was already composed and written. Whereas traditionally, she started with lyrics, and maybe she had a sound in her head, but she was starting more with lyrics. And here she started with the music, and the words kind of just followed and flowed according to what the music kind of felt like. And that's when I hear life was a willow and it bent right to your wind. I think of these lyrics just kind of bending to the music and coming out in a way that just made sense for what it sounded like and what it felt like.
Yeah, and I think too, the music is so key in this song, which is that it is interesting that it came first. But it's, for me in particular, I think something that's interesting about aestheticism as a whole is, you know, like Oscar Wilde really devoted his life to it. They were the aesthetes. They were this entire group, very much living a artistic, sumptuous lifestyle, and that's not totally feasible for everyone.
I wish.
But it's interesting because it's an idea that you don't have to 100% agree with to still take advantage of it. That it's not a surprise to anyone that the day-to-day grind can get to you, and that art helps. And I think the thing that this song kind of always does is I'll almost always pause when it comes up on my playlist and just kind of take it in because I just really love it. And it forces me to stop, forces me to appreciate beauty. And I can think about other times, like we have some pretty great museums here in Indy, and the few times that I go, I always feel so refreshed after, so much more optimistic. You know, like it does kind of change your viewpoint to just kind of pause and appreciate beauty. And so this song was that was one of the reasons too, and one of the reasons I thought bringing up aestheticism was interesting for us, because we'd all have a different interpretations, but we're doing this podcast because we do believe in the power of art. So that's why we're here.
And I actually want to tie it back to like our different interpretations for a second. So like Jodi, one of the things that you focused on in your song right before was that sometimes you can be so caught up in this beauty that it's almost like a negative thing. And I feel like we do see a little bit of that in here. Like you were a trophy or a champion ring and there was one prize, I'd cheat to win. Like there are some negative things. I mean, we could talk about come back stronger than a 90s trend, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I feel like there are some like extremes in here too, which is like it's just so beautiful, or it's so perfect, or I want it so bad that I'm willing to do like this negative thing for it. And then like sneak peeking a little bit ahead into how I'm going to be looking at my song, like again, aestheticism is not really supposed to be about the intellectual things. It's more about just appreciating the beauty. But if you talk about how does an artist communicate those elements, they have to use certain elements to kind of get that in the language across. And I think that's where you're talking about those principles of like, how do you describe things like color, texture, perspective, lines? And I think you definitely see a lot of that language in here too. Like I love the imagery of bent to your wind. That's like, you're talking about, it's not a straight line. You're like bending around, like there's a lot of texture, rough on the surface, but you cut through like a knife. It talks about dark as opposed to light. Like there's this language that's kind of built into this song that really turns these words into a beautiful image and really communicates that it's something to be admired. And in that way, it's like these are specific choices that she made to communicate these things.
And she pulls you into the scene with that picture that she's painting. And that's the same thing that the aesthetes did as well with their writing, right? Oscar Wilde, the rich odor of roses, right? Like you just get this stunning portrait of that brings in all of the senses. So you were talking about rough on the surface and it cuts her like a knife. They're talking about touch. Talking about touch in a song, but that is it's bringing up all of the senses to help paint this picture, to experience it for the sake of the experience, not for going and doing anything
exactly else. You can tell the priority is to focus on the beautiful things and the beautiful elements. That
it's almost
is
a meditation.
What she prioritized.
I almost think
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I almost think of the aesthetic movement now as we're talking about it as a meditation. There's this, is it meditation or this like, maybe it's more for calming anxiety, where you like, where you're supposed to label 5 things you see, 4 things you smell, 3 things you hear, whatever. I'm getting the order wrong. But it's about
that can bring you down from a panic
bring
attack.
you down from panic. Yeah, bring you
Here.
someone has told me. I don't know. I've never done it. But
I've
it's
done
about,
it and it works.
Oh, it does work. But it's about
It's
centering
work.
yourself, right? And just
Yeah.
focusing on what's in front of you as opposed to letting your thoughts spiral. And that's what are the aesthetes doing? They're having focus on what's in front of you, and whether that's art, in a book, they're describing what's in front. They're describing your different senses just to bring
the
you
sensory experiences specifically, and just
so maybe it was an anti-anxiety technique.
Ooh, I mean, if we look at the timing of the movement, it was
you had to get off the opium and get onto this anti-anxiety.
19th century, later part of 19th century.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Dorian Gray gets into this. It is one of those things where it's kind of this fine line of where Dorian starts to go wrong is when he's really pursuing that sense of pleasure at all cost, and that's how he ends up in opium dens and stuff. But
anyway,
I have 2 AP English things that are relevant to what we're saying here. One is the vocab word of the day, which is ekphrasis, EKPHRASIS.
We haven't had a vocab word of the day in a very long time.
I know.
Yeah.
Ekphrasis is the using words to describe art. And there's 2 really famous examples. One is, I think it's Aeneas's shield in the Aeneid. It's a very thorough explanation of his shield. And one of the other ones that I've had multiple professors bring up is in Oscar Wilde. When you read his plays, his stage directions often will describe the art that needs to be on stage, and he or just physically how it looks, and he does a really great job of it. But it's kind of what you're saying of using words to describe something, a visual piece of art. It's ekphrasis. It is a type of writing, and it's it's a thing.
It's a thing.
The other thing, which is interesting, is what you're saying about the 5 senses to kind of create the sense of calm and meditation and beauty. It's also how you write horror. If you ever read any Edgar Allan Poe, in particular, The Pit and the Pendulum, this is one I would teach all the time. Pit and the Pendulum, short story. I would have students read it, and I would have them write out the 5 senses and different descriptions for each of them that they found in the story. But it's one of the ways you can write really good horror, because in the same way it centers us in this moment of beauty, it can center you in the horror. When you're smelling something rank, when you feel a slimy wall, when you can hear it's a guy's tied down in a pit, and there's an axe slowly coming down that will start slicing him open. Is the Pit and the Pendulum. And so he can hear the axe moving, and he can feel the slime on the walls, and he can hear rats, and he smells.
I need to go do the 5 things I see right now.
I feel like you have just anti-anxiety.
This is the anti-willow. This is the anti-willow. Let's go play Willow and bring us back down.
To help with anxiety, and now I think I'm gonna be getting into anxiety with.
But it's interesting that's if you want to center a reader in any sort of experience, you use the 5 senses, and it's not. Yeah, it is a way to help you center yourself in the beauty, but it can center you in any emotion. If an author is doing a really good job of it, which I just think is interesting. If you think about that, when you start reading books and you're like, oh, I'm really feeling this, you can probably go back and see, oh, they've hit on more than one. It's not just what I'm seeing. They're hitting on multiple senses to pull you into the moment, which is interesting.
I'm going to go ahead and put out the spoiler that this is the song that we are going to be doing in our deep dive next week. So we'll talk about certain aspects of the song that pertain to aestheticism today, and then we'll go into more depth because it's just a beautiful song and it has so much more that we can discuss next week. So don't feel too bad if we don't get to a point that you wanted to discuss on the show. And with that, the spoiler is I'm doing the song Gold Rush.
I'm so excited.
Me too. I love the song. Also from Evermore, came out in 2020, written by Taylor Swift and our boy Jack. This place that I got the lyrics this time said Jack Michael Antonoff.
Oh, we need a t-shirt that says our boy Jack, because that's how we talk about it. We just say our boy Jack.
Our boy Jack. And
track number?
Beautiful lyricist, as we know. Track number 3. Is it track number 3? Is that right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes, it is.
That feels right.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, Willow was 1, so it was we're really at the beginning of this album.
We're 2 songs later.
Yeah, we're 2 songs later, and
more beauty,
clearly
more aestheticism.
Clearly, she was in a mood when writing this album. I'm going to be focusing, as I kind of suggested right before the break, was on some of the ekphrastic elements of her writing, because I do see this as an ekphrastic poem. But really, she is focused on, once again, the beauty of this person. I am going to assume it's a boy, but we do this a lot on the show. Actually, now that I'm looking through it, I don't have any evidence to suggest that it's actually a boy.
No, but for the purposes of a conversation, it's
like let's assume it's a boy. The song like really opens up with descriptive words like gleaming, twinkling. She has these one words kind of like littered throughout. And then obviously there's this line of why must you be so beautiful, or to grow up, how can you grow up to be that beautiful? What must it be like to grow up that beautiful? And then she just spends a ton of time describing that beauty. Like your hair falling into place like dominoes. I can't dare to dream about you anymore. That kind of goes back to the first song, I think really similar to like.
Yeah, this is an Oscar Wilde song.
Yeah. It's just,
it's like this song was written by Oscar Wilde. I'm losing my mind.
You're so beautiful. I'm losing your mind. I mean, it reminds me of Gorgeous a lot in many ways. It's kind of a similar formula. You're just so pretty that like, I can't deal with it. There is a line of, I don't like a gold rush. So the difference here is that she doesn't want to jump in because of all the reasons, because everybody else also recognizes how beautiful this person is, that she wants to be different. But the fact remains that most of the song is just spent describing the beauty.
I know.
That actually, I did not think about this at all, but as soon as you're saying it, it kind of reminds me of the line in one of the Vault tracks from 1989, where it's the right place or wrong place, right time, which I always thought was really interesting in the idea of like, this is the perfect time for whatever's happening, but I shouldn't be here.
Slut.
Kind of that.
Sorry, I just had to sing the whole thing in my head.
No, I was like, it's one of them.
Slut.
I can't remember.
Slut exclamation point.
Yes. But it's kind of that idea of this gold rush of like, yes, everyone wants this. I don't think I should be here. This isn't.
Yeah, this sounds like
me.
Not a good idea.
But I totally get why, because you're like, I don't like anticipating the red flush. I also like, just having gone through this discussion today, I'm like thinking about like how negative this song is. I did not do the exercise of like highlighting the positive and negative words.
I did.
Yay!
Sinking ships. I would die to feel your touch. Bone crush. Oh, was that it?
No, I think
that's just in the first two.
That's just in the
I don't like
first two
that
lines.
Falling feels like flying till the bone crush.
Yeah, double vision. I don't know if that's really negative.
Could never be. I don't like. Like everything.
And then there's the contrarian shit. Like that's a strong.
I love this whole
interruption.
Song. So Jen, the same way you feel when you hear Willow, I feel when I hear Gold Rush. Where I'm just like, yes, I love this. I never want it to end. I feel caught up in the rush of emotions of it. And I almost feel like I'm falling, like Alice falling down the rabbit hole during this song. I don't know if that's because of the line. I don't feel it like that falling feels like flying to the bone crush. But to me, this song is this feeling of like wonder as you're falling, and we're like, you're a little scared, but also like, oh, how cool. I can see everything going by.
This song also opens and closes. We'll talk about this more in a slightly different sense in the deep dive, but it opens and closes in kind of like this siren song.
Yes.
She straight up says eyes like sinking ships, but I think it like lures you into the song and then lures you out.
Almost jump in, right? Like,
and the concept of the sirens also was so it was all about beauty. It was like the sirens are these like incredibly captivating, beautiful creatures that just sit on rocks and lure sailors in who are like desperate for beauty, really, and people just get lost in them and it pulls them in. And it starts and ends that way, which really feels like the song then is the item of beauty. Like this whole song itself is so beautiful in a kind of way that you're being lured in.
Well, and we should be grateful that our siren is Taylor Swift, who we can listen to. Because whenever I hear sirens, I think about the Odyssey, how Odysseus had his
he couldn't
crew tie him to the mast so he could hear, and everyone else had to wear earplugs, and that he just was like screaming to be set free the whole time. Is like the only person who's lived and heard them, and we can listen to Taylor, so that's nice.
We can. I mean,
without always screaming every now and then.
We do scream, and then we give her all of our money. I go back to the one. What must it like to grow up to grow up that beautiful. And I just like, that is Dorian Gray. We are talking exactly about Dorian Gray, and that is that line that I pulled up earlier. A little jealous of the picture for being a whole month younger than I am. I must admit, I delight in it.
Well, you also get the contrarian shit, which is just like literally every time Lord Henry and Dorian are talking, they're just like
it's all contrarian shit.
All contrarian shit.
Well, I was going to draw our attention back to some of the ekphrasis in this poem, now that I've learned my new word of the day, because there is a lot of it. Gold itself is, I could argue, maybe a color, but it is a lot more than that. And I was actually trying to research connections between gold and aestheticism, or like its use, the use of gold during aesthetic movement, and it was pretty hard to find. It's very easy to pinpoint what the aesthetic qualities of gold are. Like there's a lot of like literature on that. There was a lot of gold used in the Renaissance era, which is a while earlier than this movement. It was often used to reflect like show light. But one thing that I did come across is that aestheticism was about decadence and beauty, not just beauty. And in that sense, I think gold is like the ultimate kind of decadent material in many, many ways. It not only did it look beautiful and it was shiny, but it was associated with pricelessness and a value. And I don't know, I just think it's interesting that she chooses that analogy in many, many ways. But then there's also, like the things like gleaming, twinkling. There's a lot of texture throughout this poem. Song.
It is a poem. Song. I felt the same thing about Willow. When I was reading Willow, I was like, this is a poem. And I think very much, even the form, we'll get into this in the deep dive, but I'm like, there's no is there a bridge? Because I wrote ABCBCA is like the form of the song.
It's not as clearly broken out in stanzas as other songs are either, or verses. But she uses sound to create some texture even within the song itself, like brush, blush, crush. This is like the rush, like that is a kind of textury sound. You have things like wooden floors.
They're very onomatopoeic sounds, crush, blush. Almost.
I'm just trying to like, there's so many textures just throughout this song. So I felt like it was really in line with that. There's definitely the rose blush. There's some use of color.
Rose blush is very Oscar Wilde. He's always talking about roses. You were talking about how you were trying to find the use of gold in aestheticism. Flowers are what comes up all the time. It's always flowers. And so rose blush definitely elicited that for me. I also wrote down this quote from the book. He thought of his friend's young, fiery colored life and wondered how it was all going to end. And I'm like, oh, that's this song to me, right? Where you meet someone and you're just like imagining the whole thing and seeing how it's going to end.
Yeah, I feel like this song is starting out in kind of an aestheticism mindset, and it's trying to avoid that hedonism. It's a like, I don't like slow motion, double vision, and rose blush. That sounds beautiful. I don't like that falling feels tough like flying. Flying is a very experiential till the bone crush. It almost feels like it's a like, wow, you're beautiful and I can enjoy this. But if I pursue you because of beauty and I'm trying to get pleasure out of it, I'm no longer just aesthetically enjoying your beauty. If I pursue it, it becomes something different. It has that
become trapped
motive and it moves away from aestheticism. And that's a bad idea. You are something to be enjoyed, not something to have.
It's somebody who's almost resisting a little bit of getting too caught up in it.
Well, because once you have something, I think of aestheticism now, I'm thinking of something you experience, you can see, but don't really engage in an experience, because then you're going that level deeper. And the line, they've never seen a love as pure as it. And then it fades into the gray of my day old tea, because it could never be. To me, day old tea, you have to have tea in order for it to be day old. And you can't have this. You can't, you just have to look at this and experience it, but you can't. You can only experience this by looking at it, but not by actually experiencing and having this love, this person.
Yeah, I think the idea that just came to mind that kind of also shows that division is, if I went to a museum and I was like, I love this piece of art, I'm enjoying it, great. If I'm like, I'm going to steal it because I need it for myself, that's where that moral issue comes into play. Which is interesting, particularly with, again, I think there's a lot of problematic issues with applying this to like people, But again, you can say that person is beautiful and I just appreciate
the beauty.
Yeah, but when I want to make them mine, that turns
When you're
into something
Ursula and
more.
you want to steal the voice to have it for yourself,
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Yeah, she's not enjoying the concert. She wants to have it. She wants to
That
own
needs
it.
to be
Consume
my
it, yeah.
voice.
Yeah. And I feel like we get that a lot in really throughout Taylor's music, this idea of like appreciating someone, but like we talked about this when we did Marxist theory of like mine, of the difference between loving someone, wanting someone, owning someone, being with someone. I feel like she plays on all the different versions of that, and like what does that look like and what does that feel like, and for better or for worse. And I think that's a really interesting. She did seem to have a trend for a while. I don't know if it's in folklore as much, but in Reputation, Folklore, and Evermore, where it's a lot of just like, you're pretty.
You're pretty.
I like that.
You're pretty,
Which is kind of funny.
I think you're pretty.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll
There's so much more we can say about this song.
Oh,
and
so
we
let's
will.
do it.
So join us next week as we deep dive Gold Rush.